This is an X-Wing. No, it's not. This is actually a Ford GT LM, and the LM stands for Le Mans, the famous historic French battleground where Ford gave Ferrari a bit of a spanking. But that is ancient history. If you want more on that story, check out the movie Ford versus Ferrari. They tell it quite well. But for today's video, I want to talk about this car. Not just the Ford GT in general, but specifically the LM, what it is that the Le Mans edition means. And then at the end of the video, we'll find out which of the CarCave crates this fits into. This is the Mark II of the Ford GT. The Mark I was released back in 2004, 2005, and that was really just to take a trip down nostalgia lane, and that car is brilliant. It had a supercharged V8, 500 horsepower, only manual, great car. Maybe we'll do a video on one of those in the future. But this car was released in 2017, and it's a proper racing car. And to give you an idea of what I mean by that, this body style, this actual car was already racing in GT Spec Series in 2016. The road-going version came out a year later, so this is a racing car first before it's a road car. And you really start to see that when you look at the exterior design. I mean, this car could not have been conceived by a human being. The interior is very simple. Much of the functionality of the car is actually controlled from the steering wheel. There's not a lot to distract you on the interior of the car. And there's no real accoutrements, there's no luxury in this car. It's just a carbon fiber tub, the bare necessities to be able to pass off as a street legal car, and everything else is strictly function. The car does look insane, but it looks insane for a reason. All these lines and ducts and curves, they're not there just for aesthetics. They're there to serve a purpose, and that purpose is on the racetrack. This generation of the GT is a V6, but it's a 3.5-liter twin turbocharged V6. Of course, it is mid-engine, and it produces 660 brake horsepower, 550 pound-feet of torque, and that drives the rear wheels only. All of the GTs came with a 7-speed double-clutch automatic gearbox, and that meant that it did 0 to 60 in 3 seconds and on to a top speed of 216 miles an hour so that you could keep up on that Mulsanne straight. All of that stuff is fine, but the thing about this car that I think is extremely special is the way that it interacts with its different driving modes. You see, driving modes are not something that is really unique to the GT. Many supercars have different driving modes. Even regular cars have sport modes and eco modes and all of these different ways that you can interact with the car. What's different about this car is the way that it behaves when you change those driving modes. If you put it in normal mode, that rear wing will retract and sit flush with the bodywork. The car will all lift very slightly. But in race mode is where you really see the major difference, because this car will drop from normal mode into race mode in seconds. It's not like other supercars that have the front end lift and it's a very gradual lifting motion. This car will drop on a dime, and it really becomes easy to appreciate how this is a proper racing car when it is race mode, because it completely eliminates the idea of a wheel gap. It sits so low to the ground, you can barely fit your finger underneath it. That's when you really start to see how much of a proper racing car this GT is. All of that stuff applies pretty much to all of the GTs from this generation, but now I want to focus in on what the LM really means. LM, or the Le Mans edition, was a very limited production of this obviously already limited car. Ford only intended on making 1,350 of this generation of the GT. The LM is limited to only 20 cars, and it marks the end of this line of the Ford GT. There won't be any more cars after these 20. These cars were built to pay homage to the 2016 victory that Ford took at Le Mans, and the only real option that you could choose on this car was either red or blue. Obviously that car, I believe it was number 68, was red and blue striped, so you get to choose between red or blue. Obviously on this car it was blue. That color selection is peppered throughout the car. Namely, you'll notice on all of the lower aerodynamics, the front splitter, the door sills, the rear diffuser, all of it is carbon fiber and it's tinted blue. There's also tinted blue carbon fiber on the side mirrors as well as the louvers on the rear engine bay. All of the LM badges have little blue pinstriping within them as well, and when you go onto the interior of this car, you start to see some pretty interesting ways that they try to incorporate the owner's color selection. I've never really seen a car that's done something like this. but the interior on the GT LM is asymmetrical, meaning the driver's seat is the same color as was selected, blue, but the passenger seat is black. All of the stitching on the passenger seat, though, is also blue. Now, the start and stop button is tinted the color that is selected. The number 68 car took first place in 2016, right? The GT racing car. The number 69 car took third place. And after the race, the engine from that number 69 car was taken out. It was put in a museum. But for this car, Ford wanted to do something really, truly special. And so what they did was they took the crankshaft out of that number 69 car's engine, ground it down into a fine powder, and used that to 3D print a plaque on the passenger dashboard of this car to commemorate that victory in 2016. And on the subject of 3D printing, also, if you take a look at the exhaust on this car, you'll notice a nice cylindrical design that is also 3D printed and is bespoke to the LM edition. So there's really not anybody that I can think of that is better suited to give feedback on this car, because obviously you drive, not only do you drive racing cars, you drive Ford racing cars really professionally. So how does this car compare? Because the point of this video that I'm really talking about is how this is really a racing car before it's a road car. Right. Would you say that that's pretty accurate as from the time that you've spent driving it?
Absolutely. From a couple different standpoints, you know, from my feel, from my feedback driving it, it just, you know, it just feels beyond a sports car. You know, right. I've had the privilege to drive a 458. I've driven a Porsche GT3, and you know, cars, you know, great in their own right. This guy likes it.
Yeah.
In the track.
I'm sure that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Just give it a little.
You know, it's just, I mean, like this, right? Like the room. Like, it's not built for comfort.
There is no room.
It's not built. It's not really fancy. You know, we got raw carbon fiber everywhere. Yeah. Which in a race car is just bare bones, right? It's just a driver's seat, the steering wheel, the pedals, and you know, your shifter, and that's about it.
It's pure function.
Pure function. Yeah. Nothing Gucci about it. Nothing fancy about it. And to me, that's what this car represents. And honestly, the 05 was a lot like that too. It wasn't over the top Lamborghini, Ferrari, you know, Audi, all this, like, which is beautiful, but it's none of that. So that just makes it feel like a race car. And then of course, knowing where it came from, like the path to get here, you know, from being developed to race and win Le Mans and to race the IMSA GTLM class, those 4 years, just knowing that had that background, that was like the birth of it, that was the reason of it, just kind of mentally puts you in that state of like, this is a race car, and that's what it is, and that's what it feels like. And we've only got 137 miles on it. Yeah. And you know, I can't wait to get into a track and put it through some paces.
Do you think you'll actually get to track this car?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So when you're gonna call me when you track this car?
I'm gonna call you. I will call you.
Awesome. That would be so awesome.
You know, I mean, doing that, like this is like a shame, right? Like driving it at 20 miles an hour through the street, like this car is not designed to do this. Right. This car is designed to be on a racetrack.
100%. Even though we're not doing any kind of crazy speeds, right? You can still feel how different of a car this is than most other supercars. Do you think that if this was not an LM, do you think you would drive it more? Or do you think you're going to drive this about the same as you would any Ford GT?
Yeah, you know, good question, because when we got the best email, you know, of our lifetime that we were receiving this car, you know, once we learned, and it was months later, I think we received the email in like May of 2022, and it wasn't until, well, I guess it was like July, when we had to sign a non-disclosure, which we can now talk about because we were in the car, but you know, they were gonna, Ford was gonna have this last run of the GTLM, and the more we learned about it and the more kind of exclusive that it became, there was kind of a part of us that we're almost like bummed about it, because it's like, man, like
it being a limited car, and I know that a lot of people that are watching this are gonna flame me in the comments for what I'm about to say, but it being a limited car almost makes it more drivable because the value is solidified in the fact that it's limited.
Sure. Yeah,
right?
totally. That's
so.
You know, and again, like the value, that's kind of what it came down to. It's like the value to it just doesn't matter because it's not something that we're going to sell.
Right.
So, period. That's kind of it. Unless nothing, we're just not going to sell.
If you had to choose between this and the 2005,
I'm gonna have, love the 05. I'm gonna have to go with this again.
Really?
For me, it's all about the history of the car, right? Like this car that we're sitting in won Le Mans.
Yeah.
And it won at Laguna Seca, and Joey Han and Dirk Mueller and Sebastian Bourdais and some of the most some of like the most world-class GT racers have driven this car.
Yeah.
In a version of this car, and that's just so cool to me. It's just like that's the coolest thing.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately the 05 was built for its 100-year anniversary.
Yeah.
It was never much of a race car. I mean, it isn't. Trust me, it hauls ass on the track. I've taken it to the track, and it rips. But
it's more of a nostalgia trip.
More of a nostalgia trip, totally.
Yeah. Which of the CarCave crates does the GT LM fit into? Well, collectability, I don't think that's even up for debate. 100% this is a very collectible car, not just because of its limited nature, but also because, of course, the heritage that it represents. As a daily driver, I probably wouldn't say so. It's not the most comfortable car in the world, but again, it's a racing car. It's not really designed to be a comfortable cruiser. Weekend car, I would take this out on the weekends. I think Ford actually requires that you drive the car a certain amount of mileage, but that's a good thing. These cars should be driven, they should be enjoyed, and they should be enjoyed by everybody, not just the owners. Taking them down to a local Cars and Coffee or car show means that other people can see them and enjoy them as well. I think that's very important, so checkbox there. Track it if you can afford to. Yes, track it. That's what it's for. That's what it was made for, and that's what you should use it for. I don't think there's any reason to avoid this car. If you have the means to buy one, 100%, you should 100% be looking into it. But that's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I want to give a huge shout out to the owner. If anybody from the Ford Motor Company that was in charge of selecting who gets to get an LM, if you are watching, you guys made the best decision allocating this car to the gentleman that owns it. He's the nicest person in the world. Nobody deserves this car more than he does. So bravo there. Big thank you to him and his family for welcoming me into their beautiful home, letting me take some time to do this video for you guys. Much gratitude to them. They're absolutely lovely people. Outside of that, leave me a comment below with what you thought of the car, the video. If you have a Ford GT, share your story below. I love to read them. I'm sure other people enjoy it as well. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.